ghostly mark. Cobwebs twine and shadows dance in this twilight somber trance. Candles flicker, weary wicks, ancient echoes, time's cruel tricks. Marble figures, frozen pose, amidst the silence sorrow grows. Whispering shadows, secrets keep in the depths where night meets sleep. Underneath the velvet gloom, guardians of the haunted room. Chandeliers and crystal tears reflect forgotten yesteryears. Softly chanting distant cries, through the arches sorrow sighs. Gargoyles watch with stony gaze, guardians of endless maze. Pipe organ's breath begins to rise, filling air with mournful ties. Whispering shadows, secrets keep in the depths where night meets sleep. Underneath the velvet gloom, guardians of the haunted room.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Lady Red, the Black Pants Legion, back to rant about more absolute nonsense and writing. And it's been over a week. I'm trying to remember how to do this streaming thing, and hopefully things are working. People can hear me, and yeah, we are back. And I am going to find the right button so that Aiden can also be here. Say hi, Aiden.
Hi, Aiden.
Good job, well done.
Yay.
We might have a little bit of background noise. I apologise if we do. We are currently laundering things in the tiny cottage that we are still occupying because the dogs had a play today and they had a bath.
Because they was stinky.
They were super stinky and we were very mean to them. We not only gave them a bath, but instead of giving them the nice hot water that they prefer to have, we bathed them outside with the hose because it was easier.
Yeah.
The upside is they're now all laid down very nicely, having a big sleep because they had a huge run around. Yeah, stinky doggos do get the hose. They had a wonderful time at the park today. They made new friends, they chased up and down, they shouted a whole lot, and I got stung on the forehead by stinging nettles. So, you know, it's been a morning. How are you guys, chat? And how is Aiden?
I mean, I'm doing all right. More or less the same as you, minus the stinging nettle. Watching the little hellions run their little hearts out, chasing new friends and playing vigorously. And then trying to wrangle them when they're doing the bathing thing. But, yeah.
Heckmanistan says we're monsters and they should have the
Oh.
dogs. Pip agrees. We are in fact monsters. Are we bad, Pip? Yeah, you think so? You telling people all about it?
And here we go. Pip. He was content to just yell in his chair, and then Anka made a single yip, and that was it. Off to the races.
So we do have a pup date today. I might do that nice and early on as people seemed interested, and you can see the boy boo-wooing. It's
Oh,
from
yes.
this weekend just gone, where Squick kindly came over and brought some Squicknology with him, which is to say we strapped a GoPro to Pip and took him to the park. So I will be very happy to show you guys that. And I did do the work that I wanted to do, despite the fact that I did, in fact, go away and do things on Friday and went to the meetup, the Northwest meetup, and we had a wonderful time. It was lovely. But I did do the work I promised I would do. I'm eager to talk that over with you guys this week, to look at some cultural stuff, review the things that I wrote, maybe start putting together some new stuff. I think I'd like to tackle what our capital city is going to be and its culture and that sort of thing, so that should be fine. So we're going to do that as well. And as we were loading in, Maze Hughes was asking about my opening song. So I'm going to talk about that just very briefly, and then we'll probably move to the pup date if that suits you guys. So because of Hausercar, horrible things have happened. Some of you might know that there's this little song called Wrestling Star that was my fault. When WBPLW started going off the way that it did, Pip, please get off my keyboard. I cannot pay attention to what I'm doing if you're laying on my keys. There we go. When Hausercar started doing WBPLW and Team Moowoon was born and all of the fun stuff we did there, I went and found an AI that could make songs to create Wrestling Star, which is probably the greatest sin I've committed on this planet in all my years that I've been here. And has
Greater than giving doggos the hose.
Oh, I don't know. That Chat will have to tell me which one was the crueler thing to inflict on the world. There's now, of course, a sequel to that, which is Cosmic Suplex Love. But I also decided I was going to make myself my own theme song for once I got bullied into streaming this year. And Suno AI is the AI that I favour for that. Suno AI has a 4.0 version that launched, which is a paid version, unless you've never used Suno AI, in which case you'll get a couple of generations for free. And it's very good at taking lyrics that you write and give it and fitting things to the sort of musical style that you want. It's a pretty good AI, and for all I don't like taking away from artists and etc. there are some things that I feel that AI is very applicable for, which it's things that you would never make if it wasn't. You know, I just would not be in a advanced shit posting. Yes. One day,
Like, an example comes to mind, actually.
What's that?
If anybody has heard the song Ordnance Wizard, that was a dude and his buddy wrote the lyrics and then got the tune, and they basically made it into an actual song using the same system.
Which is exactly what I did to make the theme song for my stream. I told it the lyrics. I told Suno what sort of style I was looking for, that I wanted something atmospheric, a female vocalist, all that sort of thing. But the lyrics were something I wrote myself. So the opening song for my stream is called Twilight Shadows. If anybody wants it for any reason, just DM me. I'll happily send it to you, as well as Wrestling Star and Cosmic Suplex Love, as I have those as well. If for any reason you should want them.
Oh, it's in my head now. God
But
damn.
yeah, the reason it sounded a little bit like Evanescence is because I did ask the AI to work within that sort of genre. So that's where that came from. It is, in fact, a royalty-free song, etc., etc. That is that. Von Falkenstein is very unhappy I haven't played the pup date yet. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop wittering and let you guys see the pup date. This was on Sunday last week.
Afghanistan is still on the We're
Yes.
Monsters.
Yes, Heckmanistan is very much in camp, no bath dog. All right, I'm going to shut us up for a minute and I'm going to play the Pip date. We will be back.
Go say hi, Pip. Go on.
And there we go, a pup date. That was Pip at the park having a wonderful time. I agree with Ark on Erica. It's sort of Animal Crossing Stardew vibe music to that. I think Aiden chose a good track. I am looking forward to seeing the Doom version though.
It was literally the first thing that popped up when I looked up Playful on Epidemic Sound. I'm like, it started going do 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 do. I'm like, wow, this is very Pip at the park. Okay, well, I guess we don't need to look any harder. Fine. There's another track by the same dude that is very much Anka in a nutshell. If we ever did this with her, though the harness and GoPro that we had were too big for her to carry, so she needs to get a little bit bigger.
And hopefully, once she does, if we're able to do that sort of thing with her, Anka is the most adventurous of the three in terms of obstacle courses. So that could make for a good pup date in the future once she grows just a little bit more than she currently is. A low effort version of the pup date. No, sometimes you just find the perfect thing and then you just go, you know what? This is already perfect.
Look, considering I put it together from the raw footage less than an hour before I went live yesterday, it had to be the low effort.
I think you
Because
did a
there
good
wasn't
job.
enough time for the high effort version.
I still think you did a good job, and it was very fun just seeing the world from Pip's point of view. Right, other things I want to do. Let's turn the background music back on for you guys, so it's not just the sound of my wittering that you're listening to. Right, we talked about opening song. I said I was going to do that. We showed the pup date because very important. I think we need to sort of move on to some wittering about writing stuff this week.
My God.
Yeah, so ostensibly that's what we're here for, and I'm going to try
Theoretically.
not to pull a parallax and leave it an hour before I do the thing I'm ostensibly here for. So, not that it's Parallax's fault. He does get very distracted by some incredibly talented distractions.
Yeah. Yeah. They're very good at being distractions.
Yes. Right, so we weren't here last week, but we were here the week before, and we were doing a lot of talking about conflict in writing. We talked about fight scenes, large-scale conflicts. One of the most important things that I think we really touched on, that I really enjoyed discussing with you all, was conflicts not being monoracial. So it's this race versus this race, and they're allegories for certain cultures in our own world. There's nothing wrong with doing that, but I feel like it's a genre that has been somewhat oversaturated and oversimplified in a lot of writing. And I personally think there's a lot more interest when you have conflicts on a more sort of realistic is the word I'm going to use, but I don't...
Nuance.
Yeah, more nuanced. I think you can do more with that, especially if you're going to be doing stories that are character focused. And that's always my preference. You can obviously write stories where it's world focused. Something in a story has to change to make a story worthwhile, but it doesn't always have to be following just a single lead character. But I do enjoy character narratives, and for me that's what makes conflict more interesting, is a character's root in a conflict, what it means to individuals, because of course each of us experiences the world as an individual, and I'm very big on writing being one of those arts that's just ideal for exploring the human experience. So there'll be conflicts on the big scale, but those are not the only conflicts. I think you're going to like some of the write-ups I've done then, Ed. Nation-based war, yes, Stuka, very much so. Although you can obviously have settings, and they can be very well done, where different nations are made up of, this nation is all this race, this nation is all this race.
Attack.
Yes, and etc. You can have all sorts of things like that going on, but I do like it where it's a little bit more nuanced and you've got a little bit more to play around with. You like the one I posted the other day? Excellent. Well, I've got 9 of them to read to you guys this week. I don't know if you want to start there, or whether you want me to come to that once we actually move into Shoal writing and we just do some general sort of culture talk before we do that. I don't know which way around you guys want to do things, and I'm fine either way. It might make sense to review what we did last week before we then start talking about culture and building up some of our main cities. I'm sure you guys have noticed the notes I have on screen for those of you who are watching and not just listening in. And if you're just listening in, thank you for being here. And as well, of course, for the people who are watching. We've got a whole sort of list of things I want to go over. The currently named cities you're seeing on the right side of my screen, that's all taken from the write-ups that I did. So that's why that's there. That's where that all came from. Introspective 90 already had an idea for a city-state. I would love to hear it. It's the sort of thing I'd like to start expanding on. My goal after I hang up with you lovely folks today, I want to spend this weekend dedicatedly working on Shoal some more to get the compendium out in a fashion that will allow you guys to directly submit things to me. We've done a lot to sort of put, this is how we're going to do our write-ups of our animals. This is how we're doing our write-ups of some of our plants. This is how we're doing our write-ups of conflicts. Because we've now got all those examples of the things we've discussed established from being here and doing this every week, once I put up the PDF, the next updated version of the PDF, it should allow you guys to go, well, I want this thing to be in the setting, here is my proposed write-up, and I can just slot it in, so that you guys can then start to directly write things for the compendium yourselves, if you so wish, and have that appear in the book. So that's the state I'd like things to be in by the end of the weekend. Fingers, toes and noses crossed that some new artwork thing doesn't cross my desk that I need to prioritise, but my intention is to spend some more time on Shoal this weekend as the only other major project I need to get done at the minute. I'm not in a deadline for that's immediate, and I'm trying to push it back until a certain other thing happens. Now Diggs has the work I needed to do for him done, so I know a whole load of that won't have made any sense because there's various things I'm not talking about, but it'll get there.
It's a secret.
Yes, I don't know what's allowed to be revealed when and where, and there's stuff to be voted on, and oh god, things keep happening, and then it's all good stuff. We like creativity.
You're very bad at not taking on more work.
Yeah, the word no when it comes to art is really hard to say. I have managed to turn down a few things I knew I would not have time for this year. But I just need 36-hour days. I want to do all the things. I just need more time. All right, so your choice, chat. Do you want to review the write-ups from what we discussed last time we were here first, and then we'll start talking about culture in writing before making our own cultural stuff? Or do you want to do cultural discussion first, then we'll review stuff, then we'll start writing our own things? Which way round would you like to do it?
Ed Gauss, I feel that on a spiritual level, man. I really do.
Yeah, if we didn't have to sleep, that would certainly make things a heck of a lot easier. Introspective 90, hung on to that thought because I think that would be a really good write-up for one of our Forge cities if we just, tweak it and expand it a little bit. I think that would make a heck of a lot of sense, especially as we know the Forge cities are going to be towards the poles. So calling one furthest point would make a heck of a lot of sense. That might be a really good fit for that. I certainly like the ideas. Yeah, word limits are a nightmare. And of course, as always, if you guys have ideas, thoughts, or things you want to discuss, we have a dedicated thread over in the auxiliary Discord if you want to come and chat over there. I pay attention to every single thing that gets said in there. We have some great discussions. If it turns up there, it will probably turn up on the stream at some point so that it can be discussed. And, it gives you the ability to have longer conversations. So if you want to hop over there, and people are always welcome to DM me as well. I do always have my DMs opened. Discord's word limit is easy to get around, you're quite right. If you have Nitro, it's a fairly chunky amount of words that you can put in. Even without it though, if you just write something up in Notepad and then just split it into several messages, nice and quick and easy. And, I do read everything that happens over there because you guys are a font of inspiration and creativity.
Fond. Y'all are words.
All right. So I don't see any particular preferences either way as to which way around to do things today. Do you think we should start with reading through the stuff that I did based on last week? Do you think that'd be a good place to start?
I think so. I enjoyed reading. I enjoyed the heck out of reading it.
Yes. What I might get you to do is to perhaps pause the laundry while I do so, because holy heck, that thing's loud. I don't think we necessarily need that as a background.
It should be almost done. I think it's on the last cycle, but yeah.
We'll shake our fists at the washing machine. It's not too bad. It's not coming through too loud for you guys. I do have noise suppression on, but tiny cottage, tiny cottage. All right then. If it's not
tiny,
if it's not bothering you guys too much, then we will just move over to that. So let me move over to the right section. Here are some of the notes I kept from last week. And let's read through the write-ups that I did. So what I did with each of these, and if people want to submit other things they think should be in here, this will be the format to do it in. Each conflict has a title. It has a very brief blurb that sort of sums up what the conflict was about, and then a sort of more full description of it underneath. So the first one that I have here is the Leviathan Famine. An ancient city, a dying library, and a Leviathan whose hunger sparked a collapse that became pirate legend. Little survives of the truth behind the Leviathan famine, but every Shoaly child knows the stories. It is said that in the outer gloom of the Mistveil Sea, a once mighty city called Valesatia was consumed from within after a migrating Leviathan settled near its trade routes and feeding grounds. The beast, vast and unshakable, stripped the region bare of edible fauna and rendered coral beds inert with its psionic gravity. Valesatia's famed living library, said to be one of the oldest Temps reefs in existence, began to starve as its memory feeders withered away. At first, the city fought to stay alive, sending fleets to beg, borrow or steal from their neighbours. When diplomacy failed, raids began. Then, war. But when the central library finally died, its death song echoing through the minds of its people, the collapse became total. Memory, lore, and wealth, everything stored in the coral was lost. What remained was anarchy. Some say the last offenders turned to piracy. Others claim they vanished into the deep to become something else entirely. Modern tales speak of ghost fleets that still sail the Mistvale Sea, their crews half coral and blind, hunting with instinct rather than reason. The myth of Vale Satia's core, a still living fragment of the library filled with lost secrets and songs, fuels treasure hunters, scholars, and fortune seekers to this day. So this was a conflict I wrote up based on one of the pressures that we were talking about, and the fact that we also wanted to pay attention to some conflicts will be so old that the full details won't necessarily be remembered, and also the concept that conflict breeds legends and stories into the future as people sort of internalize something that's happened into the ongoing narrative and pass it down to future generations. So this one has some potential legends and stuff attached to it. I think we could do some stories where perhaps something that's inspiring certain people to go off on a journey is looking for this lost city. This one was one of the sort of more, I won't say light-hearted, but less sort of grim conflicts that I wrote up based on everything we discussed.
Yeah, because, you know, the starvation and extinction of a city-state is light-hearted. So, yeah, less grim is probably the better way to put it.
Yeah. We do have some light-hearted stuff in here, though. We do at least have one light-hearted, anyway.
I like this one personally. This is the one that really got me jazzed when I was reading through them last night.
Yeah, you did like
Because
this one I'm about to read.
well, I was gonna ask if I could read through it.
Sure, by all means, please do that. Let me have a drink.
Yep. Would you mind copy pasting the full thing to me so I'm not reading it off of the Twitch stream? That is my only request.
I technically sent it to you yesterday, and you could read it there, but sure. Give me a moment.
Yes, but I only have the version pre-update.
Oh, that's right. We did make an update to it because I did a silly yesterday. We'll talk about that in a moment. Give me just a moment. I need to go here. Where is Ivan? Ivan is here. That's too long, so we'll cut it there. There you go.
All right. So the scaled stand, I mean, this is one that I like because it's a good old-fashioned story of unlikely heroes and just sheer grit and determination, which is the kind of story that I'm always super on board with. So, in the era before War Titans, when mechs were made to plant kelp and shape reefs, the pilots of gentle machines faced a terrible threat. A ravenous school of lesser leviathans that descended upon their fish pens. Armed with farming tools and courage, they made the first stand, and in doing so, laid the foundation for the Titans that followed. Okay, there we go. Before the Forge Wars, before the crag-bound path was charted, there was the city of Malari's Reach, a crescent-shaped settlement wrapped around a rich coastal shelf. It was a place of bounty and simplicity, not known for warriors or invention, but for its ocean-sown harvests and coral-carved artistry. Among its people were the Titan Keepers, skilled workers who piloted early Titans designed for reef laying, silt clearing, and guiding swarms of docile fish between kelp patties. One harvest season, a migrating school of lesser leviathans, driven off course by an underwater quake, surged towards the Reach's protected fisheries. Though not truly monstrous, more the size of small ships than cities, they were voracious, clever, and drawn to the nutrient-rich waters in a feeding frenzy. The city's defenders were unprepared, the guard fleets too distant to answer the call in time. So it fell to the Titan Keepers. They had no weapons, only tools. Kelp trimmers, silt turbines, reef hammering arms. Their Titans were slow, made to lift stones, not clash with monsters. But the Keepers knew the ground, the currents, and the creatures of the reef. And they had something more. Unshakable resolve. The most famous of these pilots was Aaron of Lowbeam, a quiet podland engineer who had modified his Titan, Trundler, with an extra joint strength for hauling reef stone. According to legend, when a Leviathan latched onto his machine and disabled its left arm, Aaron gripped the broken wrist, twisted both arms around the Leviathan's neck, and strangled the creature until it expired. Others followed his example, turning broken tools and construction gear into improvised weapons, luring Leviathans into narrow canyons, collapsing coral walls onto them, and using bioluminescent baitfish to herd the monsters away. The battle lasted a single day, but its stories echo across centuries. When it was done, the shore was littered with discarded Leviathan scales, shimmering, durable, and rare. These were later harvested and shaped into armor plating, the first time any Titan wore true protection. Erin's damaged arm was reforged into a ceremonial weapon, and Trundler's mangled frame became a statue, coral encrusted, overlooking the bay it had saved. To this day, children in Molari's Reach wear scale-patterned cloaks during the Feast of the First Stand, and Titan pilots rub their tools with salt taken from the Leviathan Hollow, the narrow reef pass where the creatures turned and fled. The scaled stand remains a parable, not of strength or technology, but of heart, ingenuity, and the will to protect what matters.
Yeah, I had fun writing
Clap,
that
clap,
one.
clap, 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 clap.
Hi, Lictor.
So I really liked the heck out of that because yeah, Stuka kind of inadvertently triggered what I was going to reference. It's the reason why I liked the Imperial Guard when I was still in 40K. It's the guys who are clearly outclassed, but through sheer, testicular fortitude and stubborn refusal to give in, do the do the thing. Which
I
that's where
believe
that's real heroics right there in my opinion. Not soul shitter death murder dude that is like turbo super space marine that kills 1,000 aliens for breakfast. Like, give me something about common average man doing uncommon things, and that's much more a story I'm interested in, you know?
Uh,
believe the technical term for that is a grit.
Grit, yes. And Bully Snake, so
yeah, I had a thought on
I'm
that. Go for it, though.
yep. Well, I mentioned earlier that this was the that I needed the version that had been updated. So the original incarnation, she had written that the arm had been severed and he used it like a club. And my observation was, hot holy shit, because of water resistance to effectively club something, the amount of mass he had to just bludgeon the thing with had to be the stuff of legend, which would have been rad. But after that observation, the idea then came of literally like grabbing the limp arm by the wrist, coiling it around the thing, and then just literally crushing the creature
Yeah.
with the machine limb. And I mean, even with gills, you can still strangle
Yeah,
something if you can prevent the water flow through.
there's several things here. One is I made a terrible writer mistake of not thinking about the environment I was writing in and defaulted to my own personal experience instead of what should be the experience of the people I was writing about. This often happens when I'm tired, and this was one of the last ones that I wrote up, so I just wasn't paying attention. This is why beta readers are so important, and I pointed that out and I was like, yeah, you're right, that completely doesn't make sense. You can absolutely strangle something underwater, though, by making sure that it can't move. Most creatures of a certain size, I mean, I'm thinking of sharks in particular here. Most species of sharks need to be in motion for their gills to work. If they're still, then they will suffocate. So if you strangle, i.e. hold something around the neck and stop it from moving for long enough, potentially, it will asphyxiate and die. If you don't just, crush the life out of it. So
And
I think it works and makes a lot
and if
more
you
sense than a
Another,
club.
and if you
if you want
go on.
one more option is you can absolutely drive the spare limb into the gills, which tend to be structural weak points.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or you could strangle it by either squeezing it around the point where the plumbing lets the water flow through over the gills. Because if it doesn't, like we need air to pass into the lungs, if water does not flow through the gills, then it ain't breathing. Yes, a lot of fish, even if they don't need to stay in motion, can, suck the water in to do it. But if you completely cut off their breathing
Bully
pipe,
Snake says, translation, get rotated, idiot Leviathan.
yep. But yeah, the other idea is you literally just pin the gills shut and then hold on for dear fucking life.
Yep.
So anyway, how are you, Lictor? Thank you for joining us. I'm glad you were able to be here this week.
I just finished watching Nausicaa and the Valley of the Winds with my wife for the first time ever.
Oh, lovely.
Speaking of lighthearted,
Did you enjoy it?
It was beautiful.
Good.
I loved every second of it. It's amazing, and I'm going to run a game based off of it on Sunday, so it's going to be wonderful.
Oh, that sounds
Nice.
fabulous. So where we've
Yeah.
got to at the minute, we did a pup date at the start of stream. We talked about where my theme song came from, and then we've moved into reviewing the write-ups I did from when we were here 2 weeks ago. So we've read through 2 of them, and we've got a few more to read through.
Okay.
The next one is
Let's
The
get to
Forge
it.
Wars, so I will read that one and see what folks think of that. This is a pretty important war, but the write-up ended up being relatively small in the end because I think it just sort of speaks for itself. So, The Forge Wars. The rapid rise of ceratinoid forge technology shattered the balance of Shoal, until united resistance and fragile supply lines brought a brutal end to their industrial dominion. The Forge Wars marked Shoal's first major interspecies conflict, ignited by the explosive technological leap made by the ceratinoids, who colonised the volcanic lava tubes beneath the polar ice. These forge cities used superheated gas chambers and stabilised air pockets to build deep industrial foundries, ushering in the first era of widespread metalwork. With the discovery of how to refine coral-infused alloys and mass-produce early titans, the forge cities became juggernauts, demanding territory, monopolising gas harvesting rights from jellyfish colonies, and locking down critical coral reef beds for their factories. At first, no other coalition could match the ceratinoid advantage, but industrial success came with a cost: long, vulnerable supply chains. When the Laticols, cephalinids, and a majority of Podlan communities allied, they disrupted the forge cities' trade routes with surgical precision. Rather than matching power with power, they strangled it at the source, cutting off fuel, minerals, and food from reaching the forges. Deep ceratinoids may have held out the longest, bunkered beneath tons of rock and magma, but starvation, internal revolt, and sabotage from sympathisers within, including a notable minority of shallow ceratinoids and podlans, ultimately forced a ceasefire. The legacy of the Forge Wars lingers in Podland communities, whose families sometimes still joke, or argue, over whether their ancestors were core haulers or line cutters. Modern Shoaly politics owe much to the first grand coalition forged during this war, proof that cooperation, not conquest, shapes the moon's future. How do we feel about that? There is some more stuff that I've got that's related to this, but let's touch just on that part first.
I feel it lacks one important detail.
Bit too cut and
What
dry.
was the
Let
aim?
me come to the other stuff in just a moment. Introspective 90. We'll see if that fixes it. If it doesn't, we can expand on it. Carry on, Lictor.
I think it lacks the why metal did such why did a forge the forge cities, what was having a sharper sword or a longer lasting armor doesn't reshape wool. It is usually something bigger and deeper than that. So if they became a juggernaut, and I think that just pointing out, giving that tidbit of what was that made the ceratinoid forge cities into such a behemoth is crucial. It
Okay,
will
so we need to
also
do a bit
make
more
their
expansion on that.
Yeah, because it's not clear from the text.
Why would the ceratinoids be going to war? It's literally going to be a case of we need these resources to fund this technological push that we're going for, and we have the ability to tell you no. It's going to be other people saying, we're not okay with that, that's going to cause that.
Here's a suggestion. It was a change of the guard. How long do ceratinoids live?
I don't think we've definitively decided on that, but I imagine they are pretty long-lived.
Okay, so have a group of up and coming ceratinoids from a younger generation, being hungry, and the only way to power an ambition is through expanding. All the good and important positions back home are already taken by older, wiser, and more powerful Seraphinoids. They need somewhere else to go. They need to expand, otherwise they will never, ever see the fruits of their labors and the fruits of their ambition.
Which will move
And
into the sort of storylines I've done a lot of with Vampire, because that's the whole issue in Vampire is, yeah, when your elders don't die, what opportunities are left for the youth?
exactly. Now, all you need to do is look to Caesar or Kaiser, and you have all the materials you need. The old guard that refuses to die, and the only path forward is through the service to the country in reaching greater and more important glories. They went out and they won diplomatic victories, but they also won military ones. And it's easier to show loot than treaties.
Cool. So I need to do a little bit more work on that. That can absolutely be done. And the benefit from doing that over this weekend is I can then throw it at you, Lictor, to see what you think of the revisions before we look at it again with chat next week or through the Discord. Because I'm not out traveling or anything this weekend. I'm home. Unlike last week where, you know, all of this work was started, but I was in Oregon. So it wasn't as easy to run this past people as it will be this weekend. Okay, so let's see what else chat has had to say. Go on, love.
I want to look at what Introspective 90 has said, and there's. Part of me appreciates the thought of making an existential conflict, but at the same time, a lot of wars, at least in human history, have not been existential ones. It's not conquer or starve necessarily. I mean, in some cases that has very much been a driving force. Sure, but I like the idea of it being a major conflict for ambition, power, and resources, but not necessarily for existence.
Okay.
Now, admittedly, I do like the idea of the changing of the guard, the youth ambition. I don't know if I want it to be necessarily an existential thing in fact. Maybe they perceived it as one. Because the youth of that civilization felt that they were going to get starved out if they didn't have the chance to, you know, claim what they viewed was their rightful place. But that is something very important to keep in mind is what is an existential threat versus what is perceived as an existential threat are not necessarily going to be the same thing.
Yeah. And that was something we talked about extensively 2 weeks ago, with perception being and misperception often being part of conflict. So, yeah. Orc Slayers, I've been out of the loop for a couple of streams. Has there been any update to the snail peeps and the thermal vents and them forging stuff? Are they still doing that? I think we're moving most of the forging into forge cities and the land forging once that starts happening. I think Podlands would be able to do it on a smaller scale as a sort of natural thing that they do, but I think we've made the decision that we're going to have these central forging areas, especially with the Forge Wars being this massive conflict that we wanted to have after talking a couple of weeks ago. All right, so I did say there was some more stuff I have written up that connects to the Forge Wars. I agree with everything you guys have said. I can see exactly where you're coming from. There's things I had in my head that I don't think made it into the writing that I just kind of assumed would come across and hasn't. So refining the write-up is a good thing. This is why you do things communally and have beta readers and accept input from outside, is because other perspectives bring up things that you just completely missed or glossed over. So we'll do that. I will run it by Lictor when I'm done, and then we will obviously run it by chat next week to make sure you guys are happy with the revisions and the additions, and see if there's anything else that needs to be done. We can keep working on this. Okay, outside the divergent cultures, Theratinoids are incredibly pragmatic in their actions. So how would the misperception come about if it is not being existential? Being pragmatic doesn't necessarily always mean that individuals will not have personal biases and the like.
So
And
I'm
yeah,
going
ambushing the
to.
supply chains. And of course, the forge cities are, part of the explanation for how this gets resolved anyway. Is it could be they perceived it and it didn't come about, but it didn't come about because of how the war ended and what went on afterwards. And maybe it would have. Maybe it would have. Especially once I read through the extra things I've got. I think that will help give some context to the current wittering I'm doing. What were you going to say, Aiden?
So I want to make a observation on that. Pragmatic does not necessarily make one immune to things like ambition, misperception, folly. I will point out feudal Japanese culture. They were, in a lot of ways, extremely pragmatic in how they went about their day to day lives and their cultural organization. Because even without taking into account the states of warfare that regularly occurred, life was cheap because they lived on an island that was prone to natural disasters that could snuff out lives en masse with zero warning. So they learned to become very pragmatic in how they established their culture. They also had a penchant for extraordinary ambition among their ruling class, which is what led to multiple periods of warfare between major powers, large fractured states that would have as much infighting as they did fighting external threats, such as the Koreans and the Chinese. So I would say that it's not necessarily impossible for them to be susceptible to misperception, especially if they're at the position where they think that they have such a significant advantage that all of this excess time wasting that is negotiation, trade treaties, and the like. You get the ones who are like, yeah, okay, we're doing all this, and we're not getting what we're wanting fast enough to do the expansion that we're wanting to do. We have shit they don't. We can just steamroll them and take it. Which they might have been correct until everybody's like, oh, hell no. And then suddenly they were very incorrect.
Yeah, so we'll do a bit more writing up on this one and refine it a bit more and take all these things on board. Certainly,
fair
what
enough.
Introspective 90s brought up is I'm glad to have had this conversation from both sides. And I think we can expand this out and take into account the bits that I didn't this time round. Let me move down to the next bit because
Yes,
I
please.
think it feeds into this and I think it might help. It's not going to fix all the problems, but the next two, I'm going to read them off
Right.
back to back because it adds some more depth to the one that I've already written. So, the
Right.
quiet. Yes?
Just one thing.
Yep.
I don't want to come off the. I want to come just on the other side. The cut and dry, factual way it was written
Mm-hmm.
is excellent as an overview.
Yes.
Please do continue. That line is great.
All right, let's move through the next two and see what you guys think, and if this just adds that little bit more depth, at least on the far end of the conflict. I do think everything you guys have said about describing the start of the conflict needs to be incorporated. So we have the Quiet Leviathan and the Pact of Still Depths. When psionic silence swept across Shoal with a living mountain at its heart, former enemies became allies against annihilation. Toward the end of the Forge Wars, the world changed. An ancient Leviathan, long dormant, stirred in the trenches of the Abyssal Crescent. This one was not a predator, but a carrier, wreathed in vast mats of quiet, a coral-devouring algae that feeds on psionic resonance. The beast moved slowly, but wherever it passed, reefs died, mines went silent, and Shoal fell into comas or madness. Titans failed. Susella bonds broke. The quiet spread in its wake like a second tide. It was deep ceratinoid miners who first realised what they were facing, and shallow ceratinoid engineers who first offered solutions. Even as old enemies clashed in the upper seas, their home cities began to drown in psionic silence. Forge cities fell dark. Pirate hideouts went silent. Cephalonid caretakers watched temp libraries go still. At last, the Shoal racers set aside their grudges to form what became known as the Pact of Still Depths. In a combined effort involving hundreds of titans, biologically seeded coral counterfields, and a mass psionic broadcast known only as the Harmony Surge, the Leviathan was herded away from the densest inhabited zones. The quiet faded slowly, but not before claiming entire reef systems. The battle ended the Forge Wars not with a treaty, but with a shared trauma. Today, a memorial reef called the Stillsong Deep marks the site of the last great confrontation, where the pact was signed and the moon's fate was reshaped. Before we make any comment on that, I'm also going to read the Dry Wars, because this is sort of all at the same time this is happening. The Dry Wars. When Shoal's volcanic land became a new frontier, old rivalries followed, but so did new kinds of progress. The Dry Wars were less a single conflict than a cascade of land-based skirmishes and settlement struggles during and following the Forge Wars. With the ceratinoids weakened and the land's volcanic soil revealed to be rich in surface minerals, ambitious latical explorers, shallow ceratinoid dissidents, and curious podlings began claiming territory. What began as scattered research outposts and surface mines became permanent dwellings, and then fortified towns. This land rush was met with hostility from surviving Forge loyalists, who saw the Highlands as a final buffer against total defeat. Their fleets, now reduced in power but still formidable, blockaded land trade routes, raided new land ports, and even attempted to sabotage early atmospheric filters and envirodomes. Cephalonids, long seabound, supplied intel and tech to land settlers in exchange for research rights. Yet again, Shoal cooperation proved stronger than division. After several years of shifting alliances and proxy raids, the land stabilised as part of the Pact of Still Depths. The Dry Wars' lands claims thus became some of the first true multiracial settlements on Shoal. While veterans of the Dry Wars still squabble over land claim lines and share old war songs, the conflict helped redefine the moon's borders, not as zones of racial dominance, but of shared ambition. How do we feel about those additions? Does that help in any way? Does that hinder? Have I missed the mark? What do you guys think? The silence is terrifying.
Okay, first off, the style and class of it is excellent. The content is wonderful. I love it as a framework. I feel I can stab into this with names and places, because this feels like a little bit of a blank canvas. I need to stab names into places. If we go to the story about the Thrundles strangling the Leviathan, these do not have, these last two write-ups not have names so much.
Yeah. And I didn't want to set any sort of specific generals or specific hero names into this, because I felt that was something that I shouldn't be doing on my own. If we want to put some specific characters into these who were instrumental at certain points, very happy to do that, but I'd like that to be something that I do with input from outside.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is not a criticism in so much as an observation. This feels like a blank canvas that I feel the urge to stab into with a quill and ink and start putting lines in the sand, names to cities, put a line on the name of a famous combat. The Pact of Still Depths, beautiful. The Harmony Surge, wonderful. Can only imagine the choir that was required to produce that, to direct the energy. This is all wonderful.
Okay,
I think this is beautiful.
I'm glad you're enjoying it. It seems chat, however, feels I've missed the mark. I was trying to draw this from everything we talked about 2 weeks ago with some of the stuff that came in, and the Forge War was supposed to be our great war on the planet. So we're not having World War One and World War Two. We've just got the one war. We've just got the Great War that was like the really big one. So if you guys aren't happy with it, that's completely fair. But I'm not sure how you guys want me to fix it and where I've missed the mark and what you want me to put in. How do we fix it? If you guys aren't happy with it, and this is what I took away from what we discussed 2 weeks ago, only need 10 in the group with advantage. So I think I do need to put some more into, as you guys said, the beginning of why this. Oh, we are being raided by the Cornish Knight. Welcome in. What have you been up to recently? Hello, Frozen Soldier 45. Pleasure to see you. We are hanging around. Pip, could you please stop laying on my keyboard? It makes it very hard for me to do things. We're currently hanging around. We're doing some world building and writing over here, and what has happened? Pip, what have you done? Oh, for goodness sake. Okay, we should be back. Pip just broke the stream. Please say thank you to Pip. That was all him. He just laid on my keyboard.
Literally just flumped. He just flumped his head straight on.
Just dropped his head on multiple keys, and even though I didn't have OBS as my primary window, he just must have hit all of the hotkeys. So I'm very sorry about that, chat. We get raided, and I just balk the stream.
Frozen Soldier, please do hang out, man.
Yep.
More the merrier.
We're over here doing some world building. We're working on some of the sort of more difficult bits of establishing a world and how we're going to problem solve with some of the stuff there. I am giving the boy many pets in his sleep, despite him being very naughty. We are building a setting called Shoal. It is a ocean moon orbiting a gas giant out on the edge of the universe, and its unique thing is that it has psionics, and we have multiple species of underwater people, and they have underwater mecha. So we are currently in the process of building a compendium for our world, putting a lot of stuff into place so that we can one day, well, I say one day, it won't be that far away, probably be the start of next year, we can start writing actual narratives, because writing is one of my passions, and that's what we're wittering about. And writing an entire setting via Twitch chat sounded like a challenge worth attempting. Names to latch on to, as I say, I'm very happy to put names in. I didn't want to come up with too much on my own. I don't want to take that away from you guys. And of course, as I said, once I get stuff written up, the extra few bits that I want to do, I want to put this PDF in so that you guys can directly submit things and edits that you want, even when we're off stream. For our raiders who came in, if any of you haven't joined us on Discord, there is the Discord. It is the auxiliary of the Black Pants Legion. We have a creative writing section with a dedicated Shoal channel in there where we can discuss all the different things that we're up to, even when we're not streaming, and come across and give me more things that you want me to add. And we're building this all together as a group. It's been a very fun time.
So I have an idea about the Dry Wars.
Okay, well, before we get to that, let me read this off and then you can tell me. Introspective says, it feels a bit too artificial. The actions of the different nations, even a clinical historical record, feel a bit too directed to achieve a specific narrative outcome rather than organic development. Okay, so my question again is going to be, all right, how do we fix it?
Okay.
Because I don't want to just take this over. If I've missed the mark, then you guys are going to need to give me where you feel the problems are to solve that specific issue.
Aiden, you had an idea, and I do too. I'll monitor chat.
You go first.
Okay.
While I percolate on my thoughts to try and put them to words, because words are hard.
Okay. To make it a story about an alliance, we need to break down the Forge Wars into essentially a beginning, a middle, and an end. The Forge World started because of ambition, the fires of ambition, running out of control with power, going to the mind of the Ceratinoids. They're the instigators in this story. However, the story needs also to explain one more thing we kind of worked around. And this is with that we said that the Forge Worlds need to bring the Titans to the front. They're supposed to explain why now Titans are the main thing, the center stage. This not yet have not yet materialized in text. It's But since the Ceratinoids are the instigators, it seems like they tell the whole story, which leaves out the Alliance because we don't necessarily talk too much about the Alliance. So let's have a little chat or a little description of what is the Alliance and how did they walk into it and how did they form this alliance. And how did
I
it work
wonder
into
if perhaps what we need to, because the things that you guys are bringing up are narrative things, and we are in
Yes.
the compendium at the minute, not an actual narrative, so we are looking at that high view. If we want to make things a little bit more personal to this is exactly who the Alliance was, this is who started it, this is, these are the core skirmishes that led us from beginning to middle to end. If we want to put that in, what we're probably going to have to do is divert off into culture and establish how many nations do we have, what are our cities, where are they located, who would have been initially most impacted by the rise of the Forge cities, who are their neighbours, and what was the demographic there. Was it primarily Laticols, was it primarily Cephalonids? And that will then give us that information to feed into a bit more specifics in here, if that's where we're feeling that the weakness is with those specifics.
Counterpoint, to deviate away from culture and to back to clinical, the companion. These are the Forge Worlds. I am missing the bit about where the Titans take front stage in these wars.
So what I'm
I see.
hearing, what
One
I'm
moment.
hearing is the need
Oh,
for
mhm.
additional detail. Not necessarily that what currently exists is bad. It's just that it only covers part of what needs to be present.
Oh, I would go so far as to say the additional information should cover the basic the bullet points that we said we need these wars to cover. Um,
Needs more meat in the shell. That's a very Shoaly way
yes,
of putting it, Baron of Derpshire. Thank you.
nice,
I like that
nice.
line.
Yeah,
We're going to
let's
have to
put
do
it
a
in.
glossary at the end of the compendium of Shoaly um,
Idioms.
terms and idioms. Yeah, we're definitely going to need to do a glossary at the end. We're not necessarily trying to find out why these factions have an alliance so much as put the details together, because when you've got one nation that is having a massive technological push, and the technological push is requiring more resources and they're land grabbing, that gives the people they're land grabbing from a very good reason why they need to get together to push back. What we're needing from what it's sounding like, I think Ida summed it up really well, and Baron of Derpshire summed it up better. We need the meat in the shell to explain exactly how we got here. This is, as Introspective says, very neat, but the reason why it's neat at the minute is because it is this very high-minded view that's not going into any of the details, because there are things that we need to establish first. This is like saying, well, because Archduke Franz Ferdinand was shot, the war happened. That's where we're at. There is more than that, but it hasn't been written down yet, and we need to dig into it.
So that's kind of where I was going with things. Is it sounds like the thing that Lichter's saying is, well, the whole point of the Forge Wars is introducing war titans to the setting and making that, where they take front and center stage. in similar vein, historically speaking, to how World War One brought industry, like large scale industry, to warfare, to the great horror of everybody. The Titans are supposed to be one of the things that define how the war was fought, and we just need to kind of expand further into this for how it happens. Even if it's just a introductory blurb of once they decide, once diplomacy broke down and they decided among the Ceratinoid forge cities that it was just more expeditious for them to take rather than barter, that the initial push, I mean, it's like describing the start of World War II by the Nazis used blitzkrieg through Belgium to bypass the Maginot Line, and then, oh god, France is falling. Describe the blitzkrieg of suddenly Titans, and nobody has anything that they can do to deal with Titans because nobody's done it before on this
I
scale.
can already see the shape of some of the language I'll use to flesh some of that out, but there's going to be
Yeah.
areas that I'm still lacking because I think we need to set some other outside details down for me to be able to do that. Like, who are the neighbours to the Forge Cities? How many Forge Cities are there? We need to establish some of those details,
That
and that's moving into
I think
culture. Yeah.
I think a lot of it would be helped a lot by having a map.
Yes, and that's something that we maybe need to look into is how the heck are we going to map in a 3D environment? I'll have to
The same
think on
way
that
we
one.
map in every other 3D environment.
So,
Thank God we don't have to map in a 4D environment. That would be hard.
So I could see some different angles introspective to why they wouldn't be able to necessarily economically coerce, because they are using something so new at the time that nobody else really has developed the, I don't want to say they haven't developed the use case, but they haven't developed the awareness of the use case. So they're not really. It's like, okay, this is cool, but what we've got is already pretty solid, and what you're asking for is a bit on the extreme side. Effectively, their economies were working well enough without needing to do so, depending on whether or not the Forge cities are able to be completely self sufficient. Because let's say that they're reliant heavily on food imports, as an example, they can't just economically body the other guy if the other guy has them by the small bits, because, oh look,
You're
that's cute, but you try
you're
it and you
thinking
starve.
you're thinking. I'm sorry to barge in on this, but
Go for it.
we're using modern thinking as though everybody has the internet and can leverage history and philosophy and politics that not does not necessarily exist. The Forge
Also
was
true.
is the Forge was before World War One. Nobody believed it would act out the way it is. Nobody believed Britain at some point will jump in for Poland, okay, over a piece of paper.
I mean, there's that,
Okay,
because
that, that,
yeah,
now and I'll go over. No one thought uh, Epirus did not believe that the Romans can put up a second army and then a third one.
I mean,
Pyrrhus, king of Epirus, the idea of
yeah,
strategic victory by having more chumps to die on the battlefield, and we do not surrender after being defeated on the battlefield once. Um, the
yeah.
entire idea of a Pyrrhic victory.
I
So
mean, you,
cultures learn
yeah.
slowly, and this is a medieval in terms of technology and time and reference. This is a medieval. This is not a World War II. This is more the War of the Roses and the Hundred-Year War and a few other wars combined. This is not World War II. It's not that conflict. It's a much larger, longer, more um, complicated multifaceted. Every battle is its own story, every nation, every tribe. And at least I
I can
like to
see that.
think that the beginning of the war is maybe medieval, but the ending of the war is almost modern. They
And
had to reshape a lot of things.
yeah, and that's the thing I was going to point out is so what tends to happen, at least in human history, is that you have technology will evolve before society or law does. Like technology will outstrip society. And then society is going to play a catch-up game to figure out what the new normal is, establish policy, law, and, social norms around the newly advanced technology.
Maybe
With
invent nations, you know? Nationality is a new concept, historically speaking.
yeah, fair, fair.
I mean, these guys do not necessarily arrange themselves in nations. They do not adhere to specific moralities or specific. What is the glue that holds together these groups to even fight each other? So there's a lot of culture to be going in if we want
Yeah,
to,
I
but
think
I
our
think
only
that
way of fixing the problem that we're currently in is we need more data to feed into the problem, effectively. We need to decide some other things that will then feed into this to expand the deficiencies that we currently have and cover those and fill in the blanks, effectively. We need to fill in some blanks.
It sounds very much like we have a issue with needing to define cultural
Yes.
ties and
Yeah.
norms.
This section that we're currently in, everybody gets very excited about cultural things. I mean, we've got guys working on the first contact with humans. We've got people working on religion. We've got people who are looking at individual stories. We've got our wonderful stories of the retail worker who finds a titan in modern society and all of that sort of thing going on. So, and there's a lot of culture and stuff that's built into that, and it can be very fun. But when you want to make any of this feel like it has appropriate depth, which is what the issue is that chat is saying, is this feels too shallow, too clean, too etc., is you have to root all of these things somewhere, and that takes all the fun bits, and then you have to do what is, in my opinion, the hardest bit, which is root it into, well, where did this grow from? Where did this come from? And I think discussing some of our conflicts was really important to help us decide some of the things that we're going to move on to with our culture. But at the same time, we've got the opposite problem where because we didn't do the culture first, it's made some of the conflicts feel not entirely correct. So this is one of those sections of world building where you're trying to do things on multiple fronts at once, and you have to keep going backwards and forwards between the two and revising and going, well, okay, I've done this and it's really cool, but it doesn't make sense on this front. Okay, I now need to go over here and solve that problem, and then I need to come back and make any edits that come from solving the problem so that it becomes a cohesive whole. World building is iterative, exactly, Sunshine Temple. We are in a complicated part of this. And Frozen Soldier, for all you can say something simple like greed or guilt and the human race has fought over very little, humans and the people that we're writing are complex. Although you can boil things down to the sort of very, very core level of, at the end of the day, it was because of this. You're still always going to have that thing over the top of it happened because so and so didn't have access to this resource that they needed. But the interpersonal dramas, which is what I personally feel writing is beneficial to, is that exploration of the human experience. It's always more complicated than that on its surface. When I say the Ceratinoids alone were the instigators, they're going to be the ones that find it just because of the nature of the environment that they're moving into, but it's never going to be it was only the Ceratinoids. I did make the specifics in there that you have a very strong podland presence, And I don't think when we come out the far end of it, once we've done this iterative process, it will demonize the ceratinoids, although they will probably still be seen as one of the most aggressive species out of the species we have. Does that mean that they're bad people or they're evil or we're attaching ethics to that? It absolutely doesn't have to. And I think when we do some more work on the concept of pirate raiding fleets and some of the stuff I'd like to do with some shark individuals, you're going to get a balance there of, it's not this group is bad and everyone else is good. But in terms of very large scale conflicts, when we're looking at World War One and World War Two, we have an idea of who the villains are, and we also have the idea that it's more complex than that. And you guys are entirely right to say, hey, you've taken the stuff we discussed 2 weeks ago and you haven't put the intricacies in there. It's not coming across that it's more complicated than that. And I do want to fix that. You guys have very good insight, and this is one of the hardest parts of what we will do, and probably going to be one of the most contentious parts as we work through it, because everybody will probably have quite strong ideas one way or the other. But I do think we can get out the other side. The answer to that, Frozen Soldier, is as yet we haven't fully decided that, because we're still figuring out. We haven't done the cultural side of things yet, which I think we need to do. We're the good guys. Chat's the good guys. Are you sure? I think chat is not the good guys. Everything is your fault. Remember, chat. All of the silly shit posts I do, all of the art, all of the terrible songs that I make. It's your fault. You did this.
I'm
Chat.
sorry.
How could you?
Chat is literally our Mazda. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Ariman is in the chat. You're the bad god. There's the good god and there's the bad god, and you're the bad god. I'm sorry.
That's a really good
rules.
thought, Introspective. Introspective said, perhaps it's a case of other Shoaly frustrating ceratinoid efforts to economically and diplomatically access resources due to cultural and anti-technological bent. I think that's a really good thing to slide in, is that perhaps the ceratinoids were like, well, look, we've now got the technology to exploit these resources here, here, and here. Nobody's using them. But for the other side to turn around and go, well, no, you can't have it. There's no good reason why you can't, but you can't have it. So, where is this week's designated scapegoats? That would be you, Night Owl. You are now officially this week's scapegoat. Everything is your fault specifically.
Yes, I'm going to personally take you to Azazel and throw you from there as a scapegoat.
I'm sorry, you're throwing him from where?
Azazel.
I have no idea what that is.
Okay, do you know what a scapegoat is?
I know what a scapegoat is.
What is a scapegoat?
Somebody who's taking the fall for something that isn't necessarily to blame.
This is roots in Jewish.
Okay, then if we're going into the origin of the term, not a clue.
Yes. Okay, it's in the Torah. You're supposed to take a goat. You put all the sins of the community on the goat. You go to Mount Azazel, and you throw the goat off of it with the sins of the community, and therefore the community is cleansed. This is a scapegoat.
Oh.
It's a goat you kill to cover up the sins of the community.
I like how Introspective has reduced this down. Crab, give resources. Other Shoaly. No, it's sacred. Crab, but why? Shoaly, can't tell. Secret. Crab, fuck your secret. Flips table. I think that does sort of boil down what we're missing here, and yeah, it's not something I think I can fix live right now and just write up. And there's some more information I want to get from you guys and some of the cultural things I'd like to get to today if we have time. But I'm definitely going to work on the feedback that you've given off stream, because this is a communal project.
I'm going to.
Do you guys want to jump over to cultural stuff immediately, or do you want me to read out the last of the conflicts I currently have written up? Especially as the last one is relatively lighthearted, and I think you guys might enjoy it, but it's your choice. Or do you just want to bite into this and we start looking at some cultural things and setting some new facts in place? Which do you want to do?
I want to hear more story time.
You want to hear more story time?
Actually, hang on. Before we do, something Frozen Soldier said just gave me an idea.
Mm-hmm.
What if the whole reason why you have the Forge cities starting to be assholes and taking shit isn't because they're trying to be assholes to everybody else, but because they are being assholes to each other, as in rival forge cities. Like, well, they've got this lucrative deal, and we don't want them to have that because it's going to reduce our
That's a
position,
really
and
good point. Yes.
they start throwing shit, and the Forge Wars aren't so much the crabs versus everybody. It starts as the crabs against each other, and everybody else is like, "Hey, dude, you're stealing our shit to fuck over your cousins there. Could you leave us the fuck out of it?" And that's where you start getting it developing further into enveloping more and more and more of what's going on.
Okay, yeah, that's
And
a
then the
good extra
reason the
detail.
and the reason the first Titans are used in war is because they make the best siege engines to break into the lava tube cities of the forge cities, because they have something that other cities don't have as much of, which is thick stone walls, because this is an ocean planet. Cities are a lot more three-dimensional. You can't, unless you're building a dome, you're not going to be able to just build a wall to keep the other guy out unless you're in a cave system like the forge cities are.
Yeah.
So the Titans emerging would be an evolution of warfare. It's like, well, how are we going to get into the forge city? How about we take this thing that's designed to break really big rocks and move them, and we make it really fucking good at doing that in the most aggressive way possible.
I can see the shape of how I'm going to adjust the writing, add a ton more in. I can see what some of the paragraphs look like in my head, including some of the elements Frozen Soldier is mentioning. That yeah, the British Empire with the Spanish, that was very
Yep.
much a thing.
Yep, that's what sparked the idea off, and then introspects like, yep, crabs on both sides. So it's not, hey, yes, at this point the crabs will be the ones that started the Forge Wars, so they'll be the ones that everybody blames, but they didn't start it by attacking. It's not, and then the Fire Nation attacked. It's, wow, the Fire Nation's busy murdering itself, and all of their neighbors are kind of not happy about it because it's spilling over.
Well, as
Yeah, like the Mercenary Wars of Italy, but more
yeah,
violence.
and as I'm
That's a good
sure
way to
you
put it.
guys have been able to see, for those of you watching instead of just listening, I've been lifting stuff from chat and copying it into my documents so that I won't forget the things that we've discussed to expand this. Okay, I think I've got a good idea in my head of where I'm going to go from here to start fixing the issues you guys have brought up. And of course, it will be presented for you guys to let me know if, okay, we've now fixed it, or no, we still need to do more. We will have time with that next week, because this is iterative, as Sunshine Temple said earlier. Right.
And Frozen Soldier bringing up the idea of having political upheaval quietly triggered by a forged city that then would be setting up a favorable deal with the winner. So, before we move on, I want to ask
Yeah.
Lichter, does this answer some of what you were saying that you were looking for?
Could agree. My brain. I'm sorry. My brain gears have been stuck for a while. I think that, at least as a world creator and as a as a setting maker, I have found out the easiest way to start sorting out these sort of problems begins with a map. And so my gears have turned to, how do I make a map for Shoal?
Yeah, I think
As
that would
Red
very
had
much help.
said,
You're right.
that is because once you have a map, you can start draw lines. Ideas spring forth from a map that do not spring from otherwise. It tells you what are supply lines. It tells you where the resources are. It tells you where nations and fault lines of nations. We know, for instance, that language tend to spread along rivers in the world. In Shoal, it will probably not be so. It will spread along the beds of corals, the Thames corals, seabeds. Again, many things. While I don't believe geopolitics is an actual science in many ways, um, just as, but this is personal belief. It does help shape a narrative and a story, and this is what we're doing here. We are making a story and narrative in a world.
Yeah, we are going to need to be
So,
able to start visualizing some things, and more than just the wonderful diagram
cite
that
the.
Ninja Turtle did for us of the orbit. We need to get a lot more close in at this point. I think you're right. I think a
think that
map would really help.
I've started. What I think is to think like a Shoal for a second in 3 dimensional. I think what we need is an understanding of the Shoal map is constantly moving. It is a 4 dimensional map because uh, currents are like the weather, for instance, for Shoal, and then there's the actual weather, the stellar weather, and the electrical pulses, which to a psychically active species would be the weather.
Hmm.
So what we're having is a 2 dimensional depth map, which correlates to pressure, and you can go there and you cannot go there because surviving in certain pressures is harder for some species than others.
Yeah.
And then you have a secondary. It's like every map has 4 layers. It has the depth, it has the biome, so to speak, and thirdly, it has a psychic map of where what currents and songs are moving in what directions. Once you have that generally mapped out, and it's 3 layers on a single map, you can start seeing a picture and stories spring forth unwritten.
I could see that.
Yeah.
It's
We're going to have
these are the
some work to
folk
do before next week. That's what I'm hearing. The
I
three of
I
us are going to
have
need to get together before next week.
I'm just
I
hearing that
have
in
a-
your best Saruman voice. We have work to do.
yes, the labors they are required.
So, Frozen Soldier, that last bit right there actually ties into some of what I was going to suggest for the Dry Wars, which would have been very much a colonies being sponsored to throw happy slaps with each other for the expansion and growth of the colonies, while the sponsor nations are just chilling back like, we ain't doing shit, man. We're just making a trade deal, and they want to get in a better position to give us a better deal so they can get better stuff. That's on them.
Must
That
make
was kind
more
of my
notes.
theory. That was my theory for what we could do to improve on how the Dry Wars were set up. Yes,
Yeah,
Frozen, there very much is. Are you in the Ox? Because if not, then we should change that, because that's where you will be able to find all of this.
Yes, and I am due to do another big update of the PDF with all of the things that we've done so far. That will probably happen prior to Sunday night. So at some point over this weekend, you'll see a notification in the announcements channel saying, hey, the PDF's been updated, and it will have all of the most recent stuff that we've done, including all of this.
But
um,
in the Discord, there is a channel for General Shoal Nanigans that is where a lot of the collective effort is going into creating this setting, because this is a setting that is open to literally everybody that is in chat. Everybody that's a member of the Aux can contribute and is encouraged to contribute. The objective here is to have many voices make a setting that then anybody who wants to can start writing stories in it.
You will probably need to read through the rules and get the appropriate role to be able to see the rest of the server. Once I'm off stream, I can toodle over to the orcs and come and make sure you get what you need if you don't get it already.
Yeah, the rules tab has a thing to interact with once you have read the rules
Yeah.
to open up the rest of the server to you.
Yeah, if you have any problems though, you can always DM me. I am the_lady_red on Discord if you need to find me, and I will be very happy to help with anything that you guys need.
Welcome to the Ox, by the way. That is
Yes.
the public-facing element of the Black Pants Legion, and we got a good community there.
Yep,
Good people doing good
there's
things.
something for everybody in the Orcs. Doesn't matter what you're interested in, there'll be something in there that is in line with that and people willing to talk about it. The Orcs is
yeah.
extremely fun. For the stuff to do with Shoal, you'll be looking for the creative writing section and general shenanigans. Yes, we are legally not a cult, but
Cults get tax breaks.
yeah, we don't get tax breaks. We just have a whole load of very ridiculous people doing very ridiculous things over in the Orcs, over here on
Don't mind
the
me.
Twitch
I'm
channel.
just formulating a three-dimensional map for a psychic currents.
Thank you.
So I think it was a couple weeks ago when the question was how would you describe the Ox, somebody said the smell of burnt toast embodied.
And of course, with a whole heap of beans on top.
Yes.
It's very beany
God.
over there.
God. There is something ridiculous about beans in the Ox.
And if you're completely new to WBPL 76 and all the nonsense we do over here, we are a variety channel. I do writing on Fridays. We have different people who do gaming. We have people who do art. We've got all sorts of things going on over here. And most afternoons into the evening, there will be streamers kicking about over here. So it's a fun time. We're glad to have you.
Yeah, there we
Right.
go. Drop some more of the commands so as to, do the things.
I don't think we're going to get as far as I'd hoped to this week, but for very good reasons. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the last of these conflicts. We will discuss those and see what you guys think about the things I've put there. They're probably going to be less of an issue because they're not as integral as the Forge Wars and its sort of surrounding issues. And then next week, we'll really dig into setting some of our cultural things. If we can get a map together, and I will get together with Aiden and Lictor off stream to make sure that we've got some visual things that we can do. And I think that's going to really help us to resolve the problems that we found this week. As well as I can see the shape of some write-ups I can do that I think will help in the meantime. So let me read these bits to you and then we'll go from there. So the next one I had written up is the Cragbound conflict. A war over a volcanic strait escalated to the brink of psionic extinction, only to be halted by the conscience of one defector. The Cragbound Sea is one of Shoal's most dangerous yet resource-rich zones, racked by near constant volcanic activity that dredges rare material from the moon's mantle. In quiet times, it has several stable routes through its dangerous currents. However, during periods of volcanic unrest, this can be reduced significantly, even down to a single safe path. During the height of the last eruptive cycle, this is exactly what occurred. The single stable route, known as the Cragbound Path, is a lifeline for trade and research alike. When a decade-long super-eruption rendered all routes impassable, two powerful city-states, Turilath and Govalen, each claimed exclusive control of the path. What followed was a decade of trench warfare, though I might need to change the terminology we use there. Titan clashes and skirmishes in lava-lit waters. Titans were adapted not just for combat, but to survive boiling currents and navigate volcanic ejecta. Each city claimed it acted in self-defense. The arms race accelerated until Govalen, desperate to break the deadlock, developed a weapon of unthinkable scale. A quiet bomb designed to sterilize an entire reef city by seeding active spores into its core. The weapon was never used. A young pilot and psionics technician defected to Turilath and exposed the plan. Outcry from surrounding nations led to an emergency coalition and the signing of the Cragbound Accord. The path was temporarily overseen by a neutral council and quiet bombs were banned as a war crime. Today, while the volcanic activity has eased and trade has resumed, both cities remain under scrutiny, and the Accord remains one of the few Shoaly treaties with full religious, civil and technological backing. This was my write-up in response to you guys inventing a weapon of mass destruction 2 weeks ago.
I take
Yeah.
full responsibility.
They absolutely did that.
Yes.
We like that one. Ed's in favour of that one. That's good.
I like that. I would add one tiny little bit.
What's that?
No one has fully no side, regardless of the treaty, has fully removed or managed to prove that they have nullify the last of the spores. As in, everybody still have a little bit of the smallpox in their labs somewhere, just in case.
Okay.
It's
Okay,
like,
so we...
yes, we're hopeful. Yes, we want the setting to be about cooperation, right? But you don't give up super weapons, even with a demilitarization agreement.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah, and I could certainly add in a note that acknowledges that because, yeah, it's not that quiet bombs suddenly no longer exist, it's just that one wasn't used and they're now banned as war crimes. But being banned doesn't necessarily stop things from existing.
Yeah. We don't want to negate the possibility of someone coming up and saying, hey, remember these bombs we said we're not going to use anymore?
We do still have them, and what you're
We
saying is
still,
really not okay.
yes, you're saying things that I really don't agree with and really want to pressure on the point of me not agreeing.
Yep, I will absolutely add in a little bit extra to acknowledge that. That's very much the intent, so yeah, I'll put some lines in for that. All right, so based on another thing we discussed 2 weeks ago, the bleaching of Lumkatai. A virulent mutation of quiet decimates a city built on coral harmony, turning it into a psionic dead zone. The resulting refugee crisis and border conflicts redefine how Shoal handles reef bed exploitation and psionic biosecurity. The great city reef of Lumkatai was once a shining convergence of coral cultivation and cultural innovation, an arcology woven from living ponds and parry strands atop a bed of memory-rich temps, famed for its psionic universities and chorus temples. But without warning, a virulent mutation of the quiet algae bloomed from deep within the reef, likely awakened by illegal mining of dormant parry beds. The outbreak, initially misdiagnosed as a spiritual affliction or memory sickness, spread unchecked through Lumkatai's coral foundation. Within weeks, entire reef structures died, turning bone white as the quiet consumed them. The disaster rippled outward in waves. Neighbouring cities, fearing contamination, imposed harsh quarantine blockades and severed trade. Lumkatai's government, already fractious, collapsed into infighting between scholars, merchants and warrior caste defenders. As desperation set in, a faction of refugees fleeing the bleached reef forced their way into nearby settlements, backed by malfunctioning titans running blind without their psionic sinks. This sparked a series of retaliatory skirmishes known as the Coral Eviction Raids, which lasted several years and resulted in the collapse of multiple border city-states. In the aftermath, new international protocols for reef bed mining, coral cultivation and quiet containment were signed into law. Lumkatai itself was declared a dead zone, off-limits to all but certified quiet researchers and religious pilgrims seeking to hear the ghost hum of its final song. To this day, the bleaching is a sombre tale told across Shoal as both a warning and a mystery. How could a place so steeped in knowledge fall so suddenly, and why did the quiet mutate? How do we feel on that one?
I love everything about it. Don't ever change.
Brings to mind the idea of Ceratinoids tossing tanks full of hydrogen chloride gas into trenches wherein it turns into hydrochloric acid when it hits water. Oh, God! Please stop inventing war crimes, chat!
The dry
Wait.
wars just got spicy. Yes.
What you're not saying is what happens if they add gold to the mixture.
Okay, let me put this. I'm going to put this up the top here because I'm not quite sure where exactly that will fit in. But note taken. Jesus, chat, stop it! War crimes.
God.
I mean, do we have to stop?
Can't stop, won't stop, can't make me.
It's not a war crime until the Canadians do it.
Ooh.
Otherwise it's just bubbly Prussian tactics.
All right.
Okay.
With-
Okay. That is a new Steam name right there. That is my newest Steam name.
So, to a certain degree, I'm glad we've got to war crimes, because if you guys are in a war crimes kind of mood, you might like the next one I've written up. The War of the Split Shoal. Let's see what you guys think of this one. I wanted to do something very Salashian-based, because we haven't done a huge amount with them as yet. I think we will once we start knuckling into culture and, which races hit sapience first, and once we have our map and know where our lines are going to be drawn. I do think the Salashians...
Don't look at what I'm streaming right now.
I'm looking forward to looking at that once stream is over, but I'm also aware that we've only got 20 minutes left, so I'm going to push on with this. But I wanted something that was Salashian focused, and I wanted to have at least one sort of civil war issue. We've tried to avoid, and in most of our conflicts we haven't made them monoracial, although the Ceratinoids are sort of considered a group in the Forge Wars. It's going to be more nuanced than that, especially with the changes we're making. And for a lot of the others, what races were involved isn't even mentioned. But this one is going to be Salashian focused, and I think you'll see why in a moment. Yes?
So Grimo says we don't have Canadians here yet. I would argue that there are parts of the Salashian culture that are very much like the Canadians of our setting, in that they are the very friendly folk. If for no other reason than everybody wants to be friends with the people who are cultivating the thinking coral. Also, because paws are twitching, she's chasing in her sleep. Oh my goodness.
She is. She's being precious.
With that then proceeds to color what she's about to read. If you think of the whale and shark people as the Canadians, because, oh god.
One thought on the last conflict, it could be the instigator of the Shoal UN. Yeah, I think that's entirely possible. We're making crimes against shoal manatee. Sock! Hydrogen chloride gas flamethrowers on Titans. Oh god, we're coming up with all the war crimes. I will make you guys a section where you can just, Alright, if you submit me your war crime ideas, I will make a section where we can just list all the war crimes, and then we'll vote on which ones we're keeping, okay?
Oh my god.
That is your homework for this week, chat. This is your homework for this week, chat. DM me or post in the Discord your idea of an underwater war crime, and we will have a look at those next week. We are already on so many lists, but thankfully right now we're inventing fake war crimes for a fictional setting. It's fine.
Bonus points if it's actually something that is war crime for Shoal, but not necessarily war crime for Earth.
Yes. Bonus points for specifically ocean world ingenuity. There's your homework, chat. Right. Let me read this next one to you, because I also have invented something of a war crime. It's a biological war crime. Well, I say war crime, it's what you'll see. Let me read this to you. The War of the Split Shoal. When the Salashians turned their gift for bioengineering inward, the sea split. Whale against shark, ideal against invention, kin against kin. The war bred terror from brilliance and left a scar not just on Salashian culture, but on the coral itself. Salashians have always been the might of the open oceans, sweeping through the deeps in great migratory fleets, singing their histories across canyons and trade routes, and building strongholds on the back of their towering Susella symbiotes. I might need to rephrase it, because of course I mean on the back of the labour of their Susella symbiotes, that they're obviously not themselves huge. I might need to reword that sentence. Though often seen as blunt, Salashians are innovators in the living sciences. Their mastery of bioengineering, honed through generations of guiding symbiote evolution, is central to their way of life. The War of the Split Shoal began with a breakthrough and a betrayal. In the city pod of Sulan Trench, a consortium of biotech houses unveiled a new class of Susella. Smarter, stronger, more attuned to psionics, bred to match not just the body of a Salashian, but their thoughts, instincts, and even ambitions. The catch? These new Susella were genetically selective, designed to pair more easily with certain bloodlines. Specifically, a narrow lineage of the whale Salashians dominant in Sulayan's governing council. At first, the change was subtle. Newborn Susella grew incompatible with traditional shark Salashians. Training was harder. The psionic bond frayed. Whispers spread that someone had poisoned the Susella pools with an engineered genetic bottleneck. When called to account, Sulayan's leaders denied intentional bias, claiming the adaptations were the natural result of improvement and refinement. Selective evolution, they said. But outside Sulayan, the effect was catastrophic. Dozens of migratory clans, especially those of shark descent, found their Susella lines failing, some refusing to bond, others going feral or even dying shortly after pairing. Cultural panic set in. Ancient songs about the unity of flesh and thought were reinterpreted as warnings. In the deep singing circles of Aelor's Weft, a rival Selashian hub, faith-guided keepers of the line accused Sulayan of bioblasphemy, tampering with the sacred link between Selashian and Susella, which tradition holds is shaped in part by the bronze coral, the least understood but most adaptive of the coral species. Civil war erupted. The Split Shoal conflict was fought not with titans but with weaponized symbiotes, psionic predator packs and custom-born gene swarm clouds, living tools and terrors unleashed into battle. Pirate clans sided with old allies. Trade routes dissolved as factions clashed across open seas and deep sanctuaries. The war's most infamous invention was the Breachborn, a lineage of rapid growth Susella bred for loyalty, able to fight independently and, tragically, often uncontrollably. As the war dragged on, an alarming pattern emerged. Bronze coral populations across the combat zones began to die. Entire reefs blackened. Shoaly scholars investigating the cause found no single answer, but began to suspect that the intense bioengineering of the Susella had disrupted a delicate psionic ecology, one long entangled with the bronze coral growth cycles. Others whispered something darker, that the Susella were not merely using bronze, but somehow dependent on them in a way no one yet understood. Eventually, the war collapsed under its own unsustainability. The Breachborn turned on their masters. The great whale lord Tolan Grome of Sulayan was devoured by his own Susella when it reached reproductive maturity too fast. Aelor's keepers, victorious but shaken, called for a ceasefire. Peace was brokered not through battle, but through mutual horror. In the aftermath, sweeping regulations were placed on Susella breeding and bioengineering. New oversight councils were formed, multi-species by law, and independent coral stewards began tracking bronze health across Shoal. To this day, bioethical codes across all Shoaly culture trace their origin back to the Split Shoal. Among Selashians, even discussing Susella modifications beyond surface-level health optimization is taboo in many clans. And while bronze coral has never fully recovered in some regions even, sightings of unusual bronze mutations have quietly increased in recent decades, spawning new speculation that the war may have changed the relationship between coral and Selashian forever. How do we feel about that one?
I hope the clapping. Yes, everything about it. Yes.
I wondered
The
if we were going to
world
have
was
a civil
forever
war
changed.
to be something that was, sort of really unique. And the Selashians, to me, are one of the most fascinating races we've come up with because of the symbiote thing. It's the Krogans all over again.
It's not exactly the Krogans. It's the missiles knows where it is, but it also knows where you are, and it wants back home.
Considering
Night Owl says, "Congratulations, Red. You recreated the eugenics wars from Star Trek." I didn't mean to. Okay.
considering you were making the point that the Susella are the small symbiotic organisms for the whale people
Yes.
and the like, the fact that the whale lord got devoured by his, basically, man, he got eaten alive by Little Boy.
Yeah, a whole swarm of
Which-
little boys.
Holy fuck, they made the fucking turbo, murder piranha.
I'm just seeing in my head, that scene from DBZ Abridged where all the Namekians eat Super Kamiguru? It's that.
The way I see it, it got you made it so they were eaten by their own hands.
Yes. Literally, yes. Okay, so I think you
devoured
guys
by
seem to
your
have
own
liked this
organs.
one. They
Okay,
go-gooed
I have
themselves
a
a little.
general idea of how to model a map for sure.
Awesome. I will look forward to looking at that with you once we're
You
off
can.
stream, and then we can show chat next week. It'll be exciting.
Yeah.
Load, I have not had time as yet. The fact that I'm not in permanent housing at the minute, and last week, admittedly, I went to Beeple Northwest and met up with Tex and some of the others and had a wonderful time. I have not given myself time to sit and read, and I really need to. I'm so sorry. Zork has an idea. Everybody panic. The practice of psi ripping, which is when prisoners of war have their psychic link ripped out before being released to their own side. That's horrifying!
Sweet.
You may submit that as your war crime idea for next week. I desperately want you all to send me war crimes, because you people are terrible.
I mean,
Oh my
Varys
god! Baron of Derpshire.
What?
Bio-AI. Uprising of the Sirana.
So earlier, Varathragna was saying that Shoaly witches can't be drowned, but they can be attached to balloons and sent to the upper atmosphere. No, you don't have to get to the upper atmosphere. Just attach buoyancy to target and let the radiation do the rest.
Ceratinoids don't have war crimes, they have property crimes. Oh, you're all terrible. I love it. So send me more war crimes. Right, we've got, I think, one more to get through. Yes, one more to get through before we run out of time this stream. And this is the one that those of you who've been paying attention in the orcs have already seen. This is going to be the light-hearted conflict that I wrote. I'm British. I grew up during the height of the hooligan football era. You'll see where the inspiration for this came from. But this one should be just a little nice bit of fun on the end. The Duel of Pride Glass. What began as a sporting contest between two titans spiraled into decades of civic rivalry as psionically independent mechs and their increasingly prideful pilots dragged their cities into a theatre of petty vengeance, bombastic challenges, and underwater pageantry. The cities of Tenoril and Kaivareth were long-time trade partners, friendly rivals along the northeastern rim of the Silver Current. When both cities unveiled the first titans in their fleets infused with bronze coral, rare strains capable of granting mechs semi-independent thought and personality, a ceremonial duel was arranged to show off the craftsmanship and unity between Titan and pilot. The duel, held in a natural amphitheatre reef, was to be non-lethal and symbolic. But as the bronze coral systems began to mature, both titans developed unexpected streaks of theatrical bravado. The pilots, increasingly enmeshed in the psionic feedback of their mech's growing pride and aggression, began to display similar traits. By the time the match ended in a double knockout, and the dramatic collapse of the arena, the crowd was ecstatic, and both cities were incensed. What followed is now referred to as the Pride Glass feud, named for the gleaming coral basin where the original duel was held. Over the next 30 years, Tenoril and Kaivareth engaged in increasingly elaborate Titan challenges. Obstacle courses through living reefs, paint duels with bioluminescent ink, synchronized Titan ballets, even mech race Leviathan herding. While rarely violent, the conflict did have its costs. The continual push to outshine one another drew immense resources, caused several dangerous engineering accidents, and sparked citywide brawls when fans from either side clashed during tournaments. One infamous year saw both cities accidentally repaint a Sacred Reef complex in their colours. Eventually, an international moratorium on unsanctioned Titan duels was passed, and the bronze interface feedback systems were updated to prevent pilot bleed of Titan personality traits. Today, the feud is largely symbolic and celebrated with annual festivals, and both of the original Titans, now housed in museums, are still said to twitch if placed too near one another. How do we feel about that? Yes, pro wrestling biomechs, yes.
You made football hooligans.
I did. I made underwater football hooligans.
I mean, are they in Manchester by any chance?
I am not going to declare any fealty in any one direction or the other, but one does suspect they might both be London teams, let's put it that way.
Yeah, either that or Liverpool.
Bully Sake still says it still feels Shakespearean. Aqua Evangelions, oh god. Do we get a version of Blood Bowl underwater? There's no reason why we shouldn't.
I mean...
I just wanted to have fun with
No.
one, to have one that didn't have, you know, massive consequences on a huge biological scale. And I
On
did feel we
every
needed
war
at least
crime
one nice one.
invented.
Yes, we've
we
invented
need
many
one.
war crimes. We needed something non-war crimey.
Yes, we need the bubbling Prussian. We need the bubbling Prussian tactics.
Sparkling Russian tactic.
All right, we are just shy of where I'm supposed to finish my stream. I think we've brought up some really good problems this week that need to be solved. I think we've come up with some good things that we need to do to be able to solve them fully, which will include needing some visuals for next week to look at.
Remus, Jesus. Razor wire mines.
Yeah, no, that does make sense, though. I mean, physically restricting access to areas is going to be something that will be tried in various ways. So it does make sense. Let's get that
Yeah.
war crime channel up. I must share my ideas. I'm probably not going to make an individual channel for it because I don't know how Boss Bear would feel about that. But you can either put your ideas, because I do pay attention to every single thing said over in the Orcs in the Shoal chat. So you can either post your war crime there, you can DM it to me directly, get it to me however you would like by next week. I will put all of them in a file, and next week we will read through some war crimes, okay? Heavy water conversion bomb, liquid sodium munitions. Okay, so yep, this is your homework for the week, chat. Write me some war crimes, explain what they are, how they work, why they would be used, and any extra details you want to give me, and we'll have a look at that next week. I'm glad you guys liked some of the write-ups I've done. I think the criticisms of the ones we didn't like are very valid, and we can work on those, and it should be a fun time next time we get together. This weekend there will be a big update to the PDF so that you have access to all of the stuff that we've written so far. So if you want to look into the wars that I've read out to you today, you'll have those details there, be able to see them, and pull any inspiration from that you might want to, as well as all the other things we've written up. And yeah, I think next week's going to be really fun and terrifying, and we'll do our very best not to get banned off of Twitch. So would you guys? Yes, many Prussian sparkling ethics.
Yes.
Would you guys like me to close out with another replay of the pup day, or shall I just let you guys go and get on with your weekend?
Hello.
Oh,
Hello,
Anka has gone
Anka.
to pester her grandpups.
Oh my god, your breath is stinky.
She has been eating things she shouldn't again. So do we want one more play at the pup day, or shall I let you guys get out of here? I believe Tex and Depp will be on at 1:30 as per usual. And yeah, thank you for starting your weekend with us. I will see hopefully many of you on Sunday for WBPLW. And yeah, we'll get together then. I will play the pup day and then we will be out of here. Thank you for joining me as ever. Say bye-bye, gents.
Bye bye, gents.
Bye.